What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the final part in my journey to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which releases in just a few days as I am recording this video. So of course, today I am going to be talking about the sixth film in the franchise, Mission Impossible Fallout. Now, the general consensus surrounding this film is that it is one of, if not the best installment in this series. But you guys know I have no problem going against the popular opinion. I think the Hobbit trilogy is equal to The Lord of the Rings, and I also think that Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home are the worst films in the MCU franchise. Well, in this case, I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but there's no doubt in my mind that Fallout is the best Mission Impossible movie. Fun fact, this was actually the first Mission Impossible film that I saw. I watched it without having seen any of the previous ones, and then I went back and watched all of them in order. I've watched this film probably 6 or 7 times, and I've never gotten sick of it. Which is something I rarely say, especially about modern blockbusters. This film takes everything that worked and maybe didn't work so well in the previous Mission Impossible films and perfects it. For one, this is the best Ethan Hunt's character has ever been. Let's be honest. His characterization over the course of the series has been inconsistent, to say the least. But here, his sense of morality is clearly defined. The entire plot is kickstarted by his refusal to let Luther die to protect the plutonium. Alec Baldwin's character quite clearly states that Ethan's greatest strength is his unwillingness to choose between one life and millions. He makes his mission far more complicated than it needs to be because he won't let a handful of innocent police officers get killed. Hell, he even risks blowing his own cover by preventing one of them from being executed by his associates' men. The theme of choice permeates throughout this entire film and is key to understanding Ethan's character arc. Despite constantly fearing that he'll lose the people he cares about because of his own actions, they remain alive and well because he always makes the right decisions, even if they're difficult ones. That's what makes him a hero, and this film is about him coming to accept that. This film is also extremely well written, to a point where it puts the other MI movies to shame. I'm not gonna sit here and act like this is some deep art film, but the attention to detail is quite astounding, especially for a blockbuster being released nowadays. Whether it be them showing us where a gun is dropped during an action scene, or a phone screen that was previously damaged no longer having cracks in it, communicating to us that a certain character is clearly untrustworthy. Remember how I complained about the first Mission Impossible movie not trusting the audience to remember pieces of information from earlier in the film, instead opting to use flashbacks or replay lines of dialogue? Well, Fallout only does that once, and it's only because it was something they hadn't already clearly communicated to us visually. Don't get me wrong, some things are very obvious if you've ever seen a movie before. I wouldn't call this a subtle film by any means, but it isn't just dumb fun either. For the most part, it's smart and relies more on context clues rather than blatantly obvious lines of dialogue. It's also not one of those movies that acts like it's complex when in reality it's a convoluted mess. All of the different plot threads tie together naturally and form a satisfying picture. There are small details I didn't even notice until this most recent viewing, and in my opinion, that's the sign of a great film. In my previous review of Rogue Nation, I talked about how the pacing in that film was off. The pacing in Fallout, on the other hand, is incredibly smooth. What most people remember about each of the Mission Impossible movies are a certain action scene. In Ghost Protocol, that scene is the Burj Khalifa sequence. In Rogue Nation, the chase through Morocco. But Fallout is the only one where I remember every single one of the main action set pieces. We go from the Halo jump out of a plane to the iconic bathroom fight, a motorcycle chase through Paris, then a foot chase, and of course the epic helicopter showdown. The action scenes transition into each other seamlessly, unlike in Rogue Nation, where the exposition scenes bridging the action felt incongruent with the rest of the film. Here, the exposition scenes are short, sweet, and to the point. They don't overstay their welcome, because as previously stated, the creative team trusts the audience to pick up on the finer details of the plot. The action constantly escalates, not just in the insane scale of the stunts Tom Cruise is pulling off, but also in the way they're shot and framed. One of my favorite moments in the entire film is during the motorcycle chase, as Ethan finds himself at an intersection which branches off onto at least 6 different streets. The camera pans all the way around him as he sees all of his exits being blocked by police, until he finds a way out and continues on down the one open path. They could have shot that like any other boring chase scene, but they shot it in such a dynamic and creative way that it stuck with me since the first time I saw it. And as well made as all of this is on a technical level, the real glue holding all of it together is the score by Lorne Balfe, who, as you guys know, is one of my favorite composers. On my list last year, I put him at number 9 of 10, but I honestly feel like he deserves to be bumped up a couple notches. Although his work on his Dark Materials still takes the cake for me, this is easily a close second on his list of musical compositions. He does reuse a lot of the same themes that composers like Michael Giacchino or Joe Kramer used in the previous films, but adding in his Lorne Balfeisms give it this atmospheric, loud, booming sound. His music perfectly accompanies and even enhances what you are seeing on screen. His use of bongos and a descending piano scale to represent the villains is very distinct and far different than anything that other composers have done with this franchise musically. His work here is just jaw-dropping, and without a doubt the best score of the Mission Impossible franchise. I can't wait to see what he's cooked up for us in Dead Reckoning, even though it'll be pretty hard to beat what he's done here. Now, I've been singing this film's praises, but I don't think it's perfect. There's nothing in it that stands out as being particularly bad to me, but that doesn't mean that some things couldn't have been improved. For example, I find myself kind of mixed on Henry Cavill's character. He's kind of just a big, dumb goofball. Even as a villain, he never feels like a major threat because he gets his ass kicked in basically every fight that he's a part of. But the goofiness of his character fits tonally within the context of the film, unlike the character Franz Krieger in the first Mission Impossible, who was also designed as Ethan's polar opposite. Cavill fills that role much better, and you can see how he was meant to be a brute force of nature, whereas Solomon Lane is more of the mastermind. He's the brawn to Lane's brain, if you get what I'm saying. Speaking of Solomon Lane, this film once again solidifies him as a serious threat, not just mentally, but also physically, as we are shown in his fight with Ilsa and Benji. Bringing back Julia as a potential consequence of Ethan's actions is a great narrative choice, but they foreshadow her inclusion way too much. The opening scene is Ethan having some weird nightmare of his and Julia's wedding, but Solomon Lane is there, and around the midpoint of the film, there's another random scene where he sees Julia with Solomon Lane in the background. Okay, I get it. Clearly these bad guys have something planned for Julia. If they had excluded those two moments and waited until the scene where Henry Cavill reveals to Ethan that he's Julia's guardian angel, as he puts it, it would have made that reveal much more powerful and effective, but maybe that's just me. And I don't know why, but the death of Alec Baldwin's character has just never clicked for me. It makes sense and connects back to the main theme of the movie as well as what he told Ethan at the beginning of the film, but I've never felt the intended emotion of that scene, probably because they picked the safest character to kill off. I mean, I haven't seen Dead Reckoning yet, so I might be eating my words soon enough, but they'd never have the guts to kill off a main cast member like Simon Pegg or Ving Rhames, so it just feels kind of cheap. The last semi-negative thing I have to say about this film is that towards the end of the third act, it gets dangerously close to crossing the line into absurdity. Once Ethan rams his helicopter into another helicopter, which then rolls down a cliff onto Henry Cavill's helicopter. Ethan jumps onto Henry Cavill, their helicopter crashes onto a cliff face, and Ethan falls onto the ground almost completely unscathed. It almost breaks my suspension of disbelief. Not quite, but it gets closer than any of the previous films, excluding Mission Impossible 2. I will also say that some of the CGI effects used in that final battle don't look particularly great, but that's only because the film relies so much on practical effects and stunt work that when CGI is used, it's kind of hard not to notice it. Despite having some minor gripes with it, Mission Impossible Fallout is still a total blast and my favorite film in this franchise. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this series as much as I enjoyed making it. It's been quite the journey over these past 6 months. I'm not sure when I'm going to be seeing Dead Reckoning, but you can rest assured that once I've seen it, I will definitely be making a review of it. But with all that said, you guys let me know. What are your thoughts on Mission Impossible Fallout? Do you love it as much as I do? Do you think it's overrated? Are you looking forward to Dead Reckoning Part 1? And do you think they can top Fallout? Because that's a pretty difficult mission. A damn near impossible one, if you ask me. Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.